A year ago, as I stood on the porch of the little house on Gray Street and handed Eloise a bunch of keys, I felt like I was doing the right thing. My daughter looked at me as surprised as if I had just announced my intention of going to the moon. The house was modest, 2 stories, with 3 bedrooms and a tiny backyard. Nothing fancy, but a real lifesaver for a single mom with 2 kids. Since her divorce, Eloise had been living in rented apartments, moving back and forth every 6 months when landlords raised prices or simply decided to sell. The children, 8-year-old Owen and 5-year-old Ruby, were tired of constantly packing their suitcases. The decision to donate the house had been maturing in me for months. After Charles died, the house on Maple Avenue became too quiet, too empty. The insurance and his retirement savings gave me the financial freedom we never had during his lifetime. 37 years as a school librarian had taught me to save every dollar, to save for a rainy day. Now it wasn't a rainy day for me, but for my daughter. Eloise cried then. She stood in the middle of the empty living room and cried, clutching her keys to her chest. The children ran around the rooms, screaming with delight that they would finally have a room of their own each. Ruby even declared that she would put a girls-only sign on the door to keep her brother away from her toys. "Mommy, I don't know what to say," Eloise repeated, wiping away tears. "It's too much. I can never repay you." "You don't have to," I answered. "The important thing is that the children grow up in stability." Daniel's divorce had left Eloise practically destitute. He'd left her for a coworker 6 years younger, taking most of their savings with him. Alimony was irregular. He changed jobs to reduce his official paycheck. My daughter, who had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, took a job as a cashier at the First National Bank, the only job she could find without higher education. Things went well for the first few months. Eloise got used to the new routine, and the children settled into the neighborhood school. I visited them on Sundays, brought them pies, and helped with minor repairs. The house gradually filled with life. Children's drawings on the refrigerator, toys in the living room, the smell of home baking in the kitchen. The daughter seemed happy. She said she felt safe for the first time in a long time. The kids no longer asked when they would be moving again. Owen made friends at school. Ruby signed up for an art class at the local library. The paperwork dragged on. Lawyers, notaries, registry offices, everything was slow as usual in our small town. It was necessary to carry out an assessment of property, to check the purity of the transaction, to collect a lot of certificates. I did not rush things. The main thing that the family had a roof over their heads, and the papers will wait. In March of this year, the pipes burst in my house. It was not just leaking. It poured so that in half an hour flooded the entire basement and half of the first floor. I woke up in the night to a strange noise that sounded like a waterfall. When I went downstairs and turned on the light, I saw that there was water up to my ankles in the kitchen. The plumber had arrived in the morning and had his hands full. The old cast iron pipes, laid back in the 50s, had simply failed. In several places there were cracks, through which the water rushed under pressure. A complete replacement of the water supply system would be required, which meant opening the floors, breaking the walls, and changing most of the interior decoration. The insurance company's appraiser arrived the next day, shook his head, and gave us the amount of damage. The repair will take at least 2 months, and it is impossible to live in the house during this time. The smell of dampness permeated every corner, dark fungus stains appeared on the walls, and the electricity in the basement had been cut off for safety reasons. "Mrs. Ulrich, you should definitely find temporary accommodation," said the foreman. "The work will be going on from morning to night. Dust, noise, exposed utilities. No place for an old woman." Eloise suggested I move in with them when she heard about the flood. I arrived that same evening, looked at the devastation, and shook my head. "Mom, we have plenty of room. The kids would love it. Stay as long as you need to." I hesitated. I didn't want to disturb their peace, to intrude on their well-established routine. A year of living in the house Eloise had been given had taught her to be independent, to make her own decisions and plans. Her mother's presence could spoil everything. "Don't be silly," her daughter insisted. "You've been helping us all this time. Now it's our turn." There wasn't much of an alternative. Renting an apartment for 2 months seemed like a waste, and living in a motel was a dubious pleasure for a woman my age. Besides, I wanted to be close by, to control the progress of the repair, to keep an eye on the workers. I packed 2 suitcases with the essentials and moved into the house on Gray Street in the first days of April. Eloise cleared out a room for me upstairs next to the children's bedrooms. It was small but cozy, with a window to the garden and a comfortable bed. I put Charles's picture on the table so I wouldn't feel like a complete stranger. The first few weeks went smoothly. We quickly worked out a daily routine that suited everyone. I got up at 7:30 in the morning, cooked breakfast for the family, and got the children ready for school. Eloise would leave for work at 8 in the morning, returning at 6 in the evening. The house was left to me for that time. At first, I just looked after the household, but gradually I took on more and more responsibilities. I met the grandchildren from school, helped with homework, cooked dinner. Owen turned out to be a bright boy, but he had trouble with math. We would sit at the kitchen table and I would explain fractions to him using pies and apples as examples, and percentages using discounts at the store as examples. Ruby was more interested in reading. She would bring me books from the school library and we would read together, discussing the characters and coming up with alternative endings to stories. The girl was bright, asked a lot of questions, liked to fantasize. On weekends, we went to the park, fed the ducks in the pond. The children told me about school friends, about teachers, about who they liked and who did not. Eloise looked relaxed at these moments, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She could afford to just be a mother, not thinking about household problems. I did most of the housework, cooking, laundry, cleaning, grocery shopping. Not because my daughter asked me to, it just seemed natural. She was working full-time, raising the kids alone, dealing with a lot of problems. My help came in handy. We did our shopping together on Saturdays. Eloise would make a list. I'd add my own items. At the store, she sometimes looked at the expensive stuff. Good meats, quality cheeses, organic vegetables, but then shook her head and put something cheaper in the basket. I silently pulled out my wallet and paid the difference. I told her that I wanted to treat my grandchildren, that I had nowhere to spend my pension money anyway. The kids got used to my presence quickly. Owen brought me his drawings from school and asked me to hang them on the fridge next to his sisters. Ruby only fell asleep after I read her a bedtime story. They called me just Grandma, without any formality, told me secrets, complained about each other. The renovation of my house was slower than planned. Workers then found new problems with electrical wiring, or could not get the necessary materials, or simply did not come for unknown reasons. I called the foreman every week, and he promised to finish by the end of the month, then postponed the deadline for another couple of weeks. You see, Mrs. Ulrich, he explained, old houses are like old people. You start treating one thing, you find a dozen more problems. Eloise was not displeased with my prolonged stay, at least outwardly. She was still polite, thanking me for my help with the children and the house, asking about my plans. But sometimes I caught odd glances, obsessive, thoughtful, as if she were calculating something in her mind. By the end of May, the house began to feel like home to me. I knew where every item was, remembered the preferences of each family member. Owen didn't like oatmeal, but he enjoyed pancakes with maple syrup. Ruby adored strawberry jam and refused any other. Eloise drank her coffee strictly black, without sugar or milk, and couldn't bear to be offered sweets before noon. We developed our own rhythm. In the morning, breakfast and packing in the afternoon, my chores and picking up the kids from school in the evening, dinner as a family and helping with lessons. On Fridays, we watched movies. The kids took turns picking one. On Sundays, we went to church, then had lunch at a cafe or a picnic in the park, weather permitting. I felt needed. After Charles died, the days had been slow and monotonous. Here, however, every day was filled with things to do, with worries, with lively conversation. The children gave me energy. Their laughter filled the house with joy. Eloise told me about her work, shared her plans, asked me for advice on raising children. But something began to change around the middle of May. Eloise became more silent, thoughtful. She answered my questions about work or weekend plans with one-word answers. When I offered to help with something, she nodded, but without the same appreciation in her eyes. There was a tension that hadn't been there before. One evening, when the children were asleep, I asked if I was bothering them, if they were tired of my presence. Eloise shook her head, said it was all right, that she was just tired from work. But her voice sounded unconvincing, and her gaze slid past me without lingering on my face. I decided I was the problem. Perhaps I was interfering too actively in their lives, giving unsolicited advice, imposing my habits. I became more careful with my remarks, offered help less often, spent more time in my room. But the atmosphere did not improve, but on the contrary, became even more strained. At the end of May, the renovation of my house was finally finished. The foreman called and said that you can accept the work. I went to see. Everything looked great. New pipes, fresh paint, refinished floors. The house was waiting for my return. But somehow I didn't want to leave. Here on Gray Street, I felt like part of the family, useful and needed. And there, on Maple Avenue, all I had waiting for me was silence and memories of Charles. The conversation began on a Saturday morning on the 1st of June, when the kids had gone to the neighborhood boys' house to play soccer in the backyard. I was washing dishes after breakfast, Eloise sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring out the window. The silence dragged on, becoming uncomfortable. There was some tension in the air that I'd been feeling for days. "Mom, we need to talk," she said finally, without turning her head. I set the sponge aside and wiped my hands with the kitchen towel. There was a seriousness in my daughter's voice that made me wary. Eloise rarely began conversations in such a formal tone, as if she were preparing to deliver a rehearsed speech. "Sure, about what?" She turned to me, folding her hands on the table. Her face was calm, but there was determination in her eyes. I'd only seen that expression when she was making important decisions, when she was filing for divorce or applying for a job at the bank. "About our situation. About how long it's going to last." "You mean me living here?" I sat across from her, trying to figure out where she was going with this. "The renovation should be finished next week. I already called the foreman last night." "It's not just about the deadline, Mom. It's the principle." Eloise took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. I waited, feeling an unpleasant knot in my stomach. Something in her demeanor told me that this was not going to be an easy conversation. "This house belongs to me now," she continued, looking me straight in the eye. "You gave it to me, remember? And I'm very grateful for that, I really am. But it's my property now, and I have to learn to take responsibility for it." I didn't understand where the conversation was going. I nodded, waiting for her to continue, trying to understand her daughter's logic. "You've been living here for almost 3 months now," Eloise said, counting on her fingers. "You've been using the utilities, eating our food, occupying a room. I've thought about it for a long time, a very long time, and I've come to the conclusion that it can't go on like this." "It can't?" I repeated her words, not believing my own ears. "What exactly can't go on?" "It can't," my daughter confirmed with a strange certainty. "I need to learn to set boundaries, even with the people closest to me, especially with those closest to me." The words sounded like memorized speech, as if she'd rehearsed them in front of a mirror. I couldn't imagine my daughter, to whom I'd given this house, talking to me about boundaries. What boundaries can there be between mother and daughter? "Eloise, I don't understand. I help you with the kids, run the household, cook, clean. Doesn't that compensate me for living here?" "It's not about compensation," she interrupted quickly, as if she had expected that objection. "It's about principles. I'm a grown woman on my own. I have my own house. And if someone lives in it, even my mother, it has to be done right. It has to be done right." Those words sounded like a slap in the face. I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. Where was the Eloise who cried with happiness when she got the keys to the house? Who thanked me over and over again, promising never to forget my kindness? "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, trying to stay calm, even though everything was turning inside. "A lease. An official one, with a fixed sum of money and clear payment terms." "A lease," I repeated slowly. "With my own daughter. For the house I gave her." "Don't make a tragedy out of it, Mom," Eloise said with a touch of irritation in her voice. "It's a normal practice. Adults pay rent. It's natural and right." I got up from the table and went to the window. Children were playing ball in the yard, their laughter coming through the glass. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon in an ordinary American town, and I felt like the ground was slipping out from under my feet. How much? I asked, not turning around to look at my grandchildren playing. 1,500 a month. I turned around. Eloise was sitting with a straight back, holding the cup with both hands. Her expression was businesslike, professional, as if she were discussing the terms of a bank loan with another client. 1,500, I repeated, making sure I'd heard her correctly. That's a fair price for a place like this in our neighborhood. I did some research on the internet, looking at similar listings. I did. So she planned this conversation in advance, studied the real estate market, calculated the cost of my living in a house that she herself received as a gift. The cynicism of what was going on was astounding. And help with the children? I asked. Cooking, cleaning, picking them up from school, helping with homework? It's your choice, Mom. No one's forcing you to do that. If you want to help out, it's good for me. But the living expenses are separate. My choice. As if taking care of my grandchildren was a hobby, a retirement pastime, not a necessity of life for a working single mom. Like 3 months of daily help meant nothing. Eloise, listen to yourself, I said as calmly as I could. I gave you this house. I gave it to help you and the kids, to give you stability, a roof over your head. And now you're charging me rent to live in it? Because you gave it to me, I have to take responsibility for it, she replied with some twisted logic. It's my property, and I can't let anyone, not even you, use it for free. It's a matter of principle. Principle, I repeated. What principles can there be between mother and daughter? Between grandmother and grandchildren? The principles of adult relationships, Eloise answered, a touch of admonishment in her voice. I'm not a little girl anymore, Mom. I have children, a job, responsibilities. I have to learn to live by the rules of the adult world. The rules of the adult world. These words sounded like slogans from self-help books or articles in women's magazines. I suspected my daughter had read them somewhere, or heard them from a friend or coworker. What if I refuse to pay? I asked bluntly. Eloise was silent for a moment, swirling the cup in her hands. For the first time in the whole conversation, uncertainty flashed across her face. Then you'll have to find another place to live, she said at last. Another place. My own daughter, to whom I had given the house, was suggesting that I find another place to live. The absurdity of the situation was so blatant that I even laughed. Are you kidding? I'm dead serious, Mom. At that moment, the kids came running in from the street, bursting into the kitchen with red cheeks and disheveled hair. Owen was loudly demanding juice. Ruby was complaining that the boys wouldn't let her play soccer, saying it wasn't a girls' game. Grandma, can you tell them that girls can play soccer too? Ruby asked, hanging on my arm. Tell them it's not fair. Sure, honey, I said, stroking her head and trying to hide my confusion. The girls can play whatever they want. Eloise poured juice for the children, gave them cookies from the jar on the table. Did her usual thing, as if she hadn't just given me a financial ultimatum. I watched her, trying to figure out when my daughter became so alien, so calculating. Mom, think about my offer, she said as the kids ran back into the yard with juice and cookies. I don't want to hurt you or upset you. I just think it's fairer for everyone. Fairer, I repeated, not hiding the bitterness in my voice. Yes, it is. And for you too. You'll feel more independent, knowing you're paying your own way. You won't feel like a burden, more independent. Eloise obviously read some psychology tips on how to build healthy boundaries in a relationship. Only she didn't apply them to her ex-husband or annoying co-workers, but to her own mother, who helped her cope with the kids and the house for 3 months. How much time do I have for reflection? I asked. Until Monday, she answered after a short pause. If you agree, we will formalize all the documents through a lawyer. If not, she shrugged her shoulders before she could finish. If not, I'll have to move out. From the house I'd given her less than a year ago. From the house where I'd spent the best part of 3 months since my husband died. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. Okay, I said. I'll think about it. Eloise nodded with the look of someone who had solved a complicated business problem. Thank you for understanding, Mom. I knew you'd understand me. I headed for the stairs, feeling the urgent need to be alone, to digest what I'd heard. I stopped in the middle of the stairs when I heard my daughter's voice. "You will pay me $1,500 a month," Eloise shouted after me. "And no favors." I turned around. My daughter stood in the middle of the kitchen with her chin up, her eyes glistening with determination and perhaps anger that I hadn't immediately agreed to her terms. $1,500 a month, she repeated louder, as if I might not have heard. "That's the final price." I silently went up to my room and closed the door. Outside the window, the children continued to play, their laughter seeming mocking now. I sat down on my bed and tried to understand exactly what had happened. My daughter, to whom I had given the house, had just demanded rent from me for living in it. She demanded $1,500 a month for the right to live under the roof I had provided for her. I went up to my room, packed my things in my suitcase, and went downstairs in silence. Eloise was standing at the living room window watching the children playing. She turned around when she heard my footsteps on the stairs. "Mom, where are you going? Let's talk details." I didn't answer. Grabbed my car keys from the dresser in the hallway and headed for the door. The suitcase was heavy, but I managed on my own without asking for help. Mom, let's have an adult conversation," Eloise continued, following me. "There's no need for drama over a simple business proposition." The door slammed shut behind me with a quiet click. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove home to Maple Avenue. In the rearview mirror, I saw Eloise standing on the porch, watching me. The kids in the yard didn't even notice my departure, still playing soccer. The house smelled like fresh paint and new pipes. The workers had finished the repairs last week, but I kept putting off returning, hoping to extend my time with my grandchildren. Now I realized I had delayed for nothing. I should have come back as soon as I had the chance. The house greeted me with silence. The furniture was under a film. The floor was covered with new laminate of light oak color. Everything looked foreign, unfamiliar, as if I'd entered the home of someone else entirely. The insurance company had spent over $20,000 on the repairs, and the results were impressive. I threw the tape off Charles's chair, the one he liked to read the paper in on Sundays, and sat down. Closed my eyes, tried to calm down. $1,500 a month. For living in the house I gave my own daughter, for helping her with the kids, cooking, cleaning, doing all the things I once did for free and with joy. The first few hours passed in a sort of daze. I walked aimlessly around the house, rearranging things, washing non-existent dust. Physical activity helped me not to think about what had happened, but my thoughts still returned to the morning conversation. How could her daughter say such a thing? Where did this coldness, this businesslike attitude come from? The phone rang around 6 in the evening. "Eloise." I looked at the screen and didn't answer. Then again, and again. After the fifth ring, I turned the phone off completely. I didn't want to hear her explanations, excuses, or new demands. The night passed without sleep. I lay in bed replaying the conversation with my daughter in my head, looking for the moment when it all went wrong, when my help turned into a burden and my gratitude into demands for payment. Maybe I really had stayed with them too long. Maybe I'd violated some invisible boundary. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't about me. It was that Eloise had changed, a different person, someone who could demand rent from her own mother for a house she'd been given as a gift. Sunday morning, I called Godwin. My son lived in Springfield, an hour from here, worked as an insurance agent for a large company, married late, 40 years old, no children. Unlike his sister, he was always practical and sensible. "Hey, Mom, how's the remodeling going? When are you moving back home?" "It's finished," I said. "Godwin, I need some advice. Legal." My son's voice became serious at once. He knew I wasn't dramatic and didn't ask for help over nothing. "What's wrong, Mom? Is there a problem with the insurance?" I told him about the situation with Eloise, about demanding rent, about the principles of adult relationships, about being asked to find another place to live. Godwin listened in silence, occasionally asking for details. When I finished, my son was silent for so long that I thought the connection was broken. "Godwin, are you here?" "I'm here, Mom, just trying to see if I've heard correctly. Eloise is demanding rent for the house you gave her?" "That's right. And yet you're helping her with the kids and household chores practically full-time?" Yeah, cooking, cleaning, picking up the kids from school, helping with homework. Silence again. Then my son swore. Not in front of me, but loud enough for me to hear. Mom, have the gift papers been finalized? Have they gone through the registration process? No. The lawyer said it's going to take months. Some kind of inspections, approvals, registration with the state authorities. So technically the house is still yours? Technically, yes. But I gave my written consent to the donation, signed all the papers. The consent can be withdrawn before the official registration, said Godwin confidently. Mom, I think you need to talk to a lawyer right away. A very serious conversation. Do you think there's any chance of reversing this? I'm not a lawyer, but at the insurance company, we deal with situations like this all the time. Until the gift is officially registered, the donor has the right to change his mind, especially if there's a good reason. After talking to my son, I felt better. Not because he supported me. It was clear and without words. But because, for the first time in 24 hours, my mind was clearer. Maybe the situation wasn't as hopeless as it seemed. I found the business card of the lawyer who'd helped me with the gift. Martin Hatfield, an older man with a gray beard and attentive eyes. His office was only open on weekdays, so I had to wait until Monday. But I had already decided that I would talk to him. The weekend dragged on slowly. I tidied up the house after the renovation, hung things in the closets, put the furniture in its place. Physical work helped me not to think about what was going on, not to replay in my head the hurtful words of my daughter. On Sunday, Godwin arrived. He showed up unannounced, just knocked on the door after lunch. How are you feeling? He asked, hugging me on the doorstep. Like someone who was betrayed by the person closest to me, I answered honestly. We sat in the kitchen and I made coffee. Godwin talked about his work, about his plans for the summer, but I could feel that his mind was on something else. He started to say something a few times, then stopped. Mom, have you ever thought that Eloise might not have acted alone? He finally asked. What do you mean? This talk about principles, about adult relationships, about boundaries, it doesn't sound like her. My sister was never prone to psychological musings. Someone could have taught her. I wondered. Indeed, my daughter had always been simple and straightforward. She didn't read self-development books, wasn't into relationship psychology. Where did the talk of healthy boundaries and autonomy come from all of a sudden? Maybe, I agreed. But that doesn't change the point. She said the words herself. Of course it doesn't. It just explains why she changed so drastically. Maybe one of her friends or coworkers gave her advice on how to deal with her parents. If so, that someone gave very bad advice. Godwin stayed until the evening. We cooked dinner together, watched a movie on TV. A normal Sunday, but with a tang of sadness and anxiety. When my son was about to leave, he hugged me tighter than usual. It's gonna be okay, Mom. You're doing the right thing by going to a lawyer. What if Eloise doesn't forgive me for what I did? Mom, she should be the one apologizing to you for demanding rent on the house you gave her, not you from her. Monday morning, I called Martin Hatfield's office to make an appointment. The receptionist said there was only an afternoon slot available at 4 o'clock. I agreed. I had a few hours before my appointment with the lawyer, so I decided to go to the bank where Eloise worked. Not to talk to her, just to look at her from afar, to try to see if she had changed outwardly as much as inwardly. The First National Bank was downtown, in an old brick building with tall windows. I parked across the street and waited. Around 1:30, Eloise came out for her lunch break. She looked her usual self. Business suit, neat hair, confident gait. She passed my car without noticing me and headed for the cafe in the next street. I followed her with my gaze, trying to find any sign of doubt or remorse. But my daughter looked calm and collected, as if nothing special had happened. At 4 o'clock, I arrived at Martin Hatfield's office. A small room on the second floor of an old building, littered with books and file folders. The lawyer listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes in his notebook. Mrs. Ulrich, he said when I finished the story. Formally, the procedure of donation is not completed. The documents have been filed at the registry office, but the final registration has not yet taken place. And what does that mean practically? That you have every right to revoke the gift. Until the official registration, the donor can change his mind without giving a reason. My heart is beating faster. So I really do have a choice. I'm not doomed to put up with my daughter's demands. What would be the legal consequences of such a decision? The house will revert to your full ownership. Your daughter's rights to it would be automatically terminated. Is there any way she could challenge this decision in court? Theoretically, she could try. But since the donation is not officially finalized, she has almost no chance. The law is on your side. Hatfield opened the file folder, took out a few sheets, and put them in front of me. If you decide to revoke the gift, you'll have to file an application at the registry office. The procedure will take about 2 weeks. Will I be able to sell the house after that? Of course. After the revocation of the gift, it will be your full property, and you can dispose of it at your discretion. I took the documents, read them carefully. Everything was written in dry legal language, but the meaning was very clear. I could revoke the deed of gift and take the house back. I can dispose of it as I see fit. Mr. Hatfield, if I were to make that decision, when would I apply? The sooner the better. Every day increases the likelihood that the registration will automatically close. How much time do I have to think about it? Technically a few weeks, but I wouldn't recommend dragging it out. I thanked the lawyer and went outside. The sun was shining brightly. People were rushing about their business after a day's work. Just an ordinary Monday evening in a small town, and I had papers in my hands that could change everything. At home, I reread the papers several times, weighed the pros and cons. On the one hand, Eloise is my daughter, and severing my relationship with her means losing touch with my grandchildren. On the other hand, her demands are so outrageous that they're impossible to put up with. Eloise called all evening. First, she left long messages on the answering machine. Then she simply disconnected when she heard my voice. Around 10 p.m., she arrived. I saw her standing on the porch, ringing the doorbell, knocking on the windows. She didn't answer. "Mama, I know you're home," she was yelling from the street. "Let's talk like grown-ups, like grown-ups." Those were the words she used to justify her demand for rent. Now she was calling me an adult. The next morning, I went to Hatfield's again and signed the deed of gift. "In 2 weeks, the house will be officially returned to your ownership," he said, accepting the paperwork. "Thank you, Mrs. Ulrich." The lawyer paused, searching for words. "Can I give you some advice?" I nodded. "Family disputes are the most painful and unpredictable. Think again whether you really want to go all the way. Sometimes it's better to compromise." "What kind of compromise can there be with a man who demands rent for a donated house?" I asked. "I understand your position. I just wanted to warn you of the possible consequences." "I've already thought about it," I replied firmly. "The decision is final. You are right. I did not include this important part of the plan in the text. Let me rewrite the chapter correctly, strictly following the plan." A week after the application was submitted, Hatfield called with unexpected news. It turned out that the procedure for revoking the gift had revealed interesting details in the original paperwork. "Mrs. Ulrich, I need to see you. There's some important information regarding the status of your house." I arrived at his office the same day. Hatfield met me with a folder of documents and a concerned look on his face. "The thing is," he began, seating me in the chair across from his desk, "when I checked the documents at the registry office, there were significant delays in processing the deed of gift. The bureaucratic machine is running slower than we had anticipated." He opened a folder, pulled out some official papers with stamps. "See these marks? Your gift application is stuck in the interagency approval process. The tax service requested additional documents. The land committee was checking the boundaries of the plot, and the architectural supervisor was examining whether the house complied with building codes." I listened attentively, trying to understand what he was getting at. "So, technically, the donation had not taken place at all?" I asked. "Exactly so. According to the documents, the house was still yours. Eloise received only a preliminary consent for the future registration of ownership, but not the right itself." The information stunned me. So all these months, my daughter thought she owned a house that didn't even legally belong to her. Why didn't anyone alert us to these delays? Unfortunately, progress notices are often lost in the post office or arrive very late. Our county's bureaucracy is not known for its speed. Hatfield showed me a calendar on the wall. According to preliminary calculations, it would have taken another 3 or 4 months to finalize the gift. But now that you've withdrawn your application, it's been finalized. And what does that mean practically? The house is all yours. You can live in it, rent it out, sell it, no restrictions. After the meeting with the lawyer, I felt a strange mixture of relief and bitterness. On the one hand, the legal situation was easier than expected. On the other hand, Eloise's behavior seemed even more outrageous. She was demanding rent for a house she didn't even officially own. At home, I immediately called Sandra Wilcox. She sounded energetic, businesslike, with a slight Texas accent. The woman was clearly used to working quickly and efficiently. "I need to appraise the house for sale," I said without preamble. "Sure. Where is the property located and when is a good time to meet?" We agreed on tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. Sandra warned me that the inspection would take about an hour and asked me to prepare all the documents for the property. "What is your time frame for the sale?" she asked. "The sooner the better." "I see. We'll try to find a buyer within a month." Godwin called that evening. He sounded worried. "Mom, Eloise called me at work. She says you're making some kind of legal mess with the house." "I'm not, just getting justice." "She claims you're trying to take the house away from her as a gift." "Son," I said patiently, "the house was never hers. The deed of gift was never finalized due to bureaucratic delays. Technically, it was still mine." Godwin was silent, digesting the information. So all these months she'd thought she owned a house that didn't belong to her? "That's right, and she'd been demanding rent from me." "That's quite a situation," his son muttered. "What do you plan to do next?" "Sell it. A realtor is coming tomorrow for an appraisal." "Mom, are you sure? That's a pretty drastic step. Maybe we should talk to Eloise again." "What is there to talk about, Godwin? She's demanding $1,500 a month to live in the house I gave her. What more can there be to talk about?" "But think of the children. Owen and Ruby are used to that house. They have friends there, schools close by. I thought about that all the time. The grandchildren really aren't to blame. But their mother made a choice when she demanded rent. Now, let her deal with the consequences." "Son, I know it's hard for you to accept my decision, but Eloise overstepped the bounds of decency. Some things are unforgivable." "All right," Godwin sighed. "If that's what you decide, I'll support you. But you must be prepared for the possibility that your relationship with your sister may be permanently damaged." "It already has, ever since she demanded money for the house I gave her." Sandra Wilcox arrived this morning, a woman in her 50s in a strict business suit carrying a folder of documents and a clipboard for notes. She looked competent and professional. "Would you show me the house?" she asked as she got out of the car. We drove to Gray Street together. On the way, Sandra asked about the neighborhood, the neighbors, the state of the local infrastructure. "It's a nice neighborhood," she noted as she looked down the street. "Quiet, family-oriented. The school is nearby, the park is a 5-minute walk away. People buy houses here for a long time, not for resale." We pulled up to the house. Eloise's car wasn't in the yard. Apparently she was at work. The kids are at school. I opened the door with my keys, which I luckily hadn't given to my daughter. Sandra took a close look at all the rooms, making notes in her clipboard and taking pictures of each room. She noted the freshly renovated bathroom, new kitchen appliances, and the good condition of the parquet floors. "How many square meters of floor space?" 120, plus a basement and a small attic for storage." "How big is the plot?" 4 hectares. There's room for 2 cars, a small garden behind the house." The realtor nodded, writing down all the specifications. "What year was the house built?" 1978, but the roof is brand new. The windows were replaced 5 years ago. The heating system was updated 3 years ago." We walked around the outside of the house. Sandra checked the facade, the roof, the fence. She looked in the basement, assessed the condition of the foundation and utilities. "It's a very nice property," she said when she finished. "In such a neighborhood and in such a condition will be in demand among young families." "What is the approximate market value?" "According to my calculations, from $170,000 to $190,000. Maybe a little more if we find buyers with school-age children. $180,000 on average. That's good money for a woman my age." Enough for a secure old age and even for those trips Charles and I planned but didn't have time to take. When can you put the house on the market? 2 or 3 days. We need to draw up a contract for services, prepare advertising materials, make professional photos for placement on the internet. Is there anyone living in the house now? Sandra asked. I hesitated a little with the answer. Sooner or later, I would have to tell the truth, but I wanted to avoid unnecessary questions. My daughter is with the children, temporarily. I see. They'll need to vacate the house for showings to potential buyers. It's a prerequisite for a successful sale. That won't be a problem, I assured her, even though I knew it would be a lot of problems. Sandra gave me a contract for real estate services, explained all the terms of cooperation. Her commission was 6% of the final sale amount, standard terms for our region. Are there any special requirements for buyers? She asked. No special requirements. The main condition is a quick sale at a fair price. That's fine. I will prepare all the necessary documents and contact you in 2 days. I think we'll find a suitable buyer in a month and a half. We're back in town. Sandra promised to expedite all the procedures and start the advertising campaign as soon as possible. I drove home feeling a strange mixture of determination and anxiety. In the evening, Godwin called again. Mom, I talked to a realtor at work. He says the real estate market is pretty active right now. Good houses are selling fast. That's good news. What are you going to tell Eloise? When you're going to tell her about the sale? I don't know yet. Maybe when the first buyers show up. Mom, don't you think that's a little harsh? Putting her on the spot at the last minute? Didn't she put me on the spot by demanding rent? Did she warn me in advance of her plans? Godwin was silent. Apparently, he realized that the arguments in favor of Eloise sounded unconvincing. I understand your logic. I just feel sorry for the children. I feel sorry for them too. But it's the children who pay for what their parents do. That's the law of life. The next day, Sandra called back before the promised time. I have great news. The papers are ready. The photographer will be here tomorrow morning for the shoot. Most importantly, I already have potential buyers. So soon? A young couple with a baby. They've been looking for a house in this exact neighborhood for 6 months. They're willing to consider a purchase as soon as possible. It was faster than I expected, but it was only for the best. The sooner the house sold, the fewer problems and conflicts there would be. Set up a meeting, I said. They can come to the inspection this weekend. If they like the house, they're ready to make an offer right away. Great. Then we'll meet tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Don't forget to bring all the deeds to the house. I hung up the phone and went to the window. The neighborhood kids were playing outside just like my grandchildren in the Gray Street yard. Only now, Owen and Ruby would soon have to find a new place to play and a new home to live in. Thursday morning, Sandra arrived with a photographer to take pictures of the house. A young guy with a professional camera and a whole bunch of equipment went around all the rooms, taking pictures from different angles. He paid special attention to the kitchen and living room, the rooms that most attract buyers. This is a great property, he said as he packed up his tripods and lights. The pictures are going to sell very well. Houses like this sell fast. By lunchtime, everything was ready. Sandra showed me mock-ups of ads for internet sites and local newspapers. The house looked perfect in the pictures. Bright, spacious rooms, a neat green yard, a well-maintained facade with new paint. I will place ads today, promised the realtor. And tomorrow morning I'll show the house to the young couple I told you about. They are very interested and ready to make a decision quickly. I signed the contract for services, handed Sandra all the necessary documents. The house was officially on the market. Friday started early. At 9 in the morning, Sandra and I arrived at Gray Street to prepare the house for showing to potential buyers. Eloise wasn't there. She had gone to work at the bank as usual. The kids are at school until 3 in the afternoon. Perfect time for a quiet inspection without too many questions and explanations. We quickly arranged the furniture in the most favorable light, put away all the family's personal belongings in closets, opened all the curtains and blinds to maximize natural light. The house was transformed, looking like a picture from a glossy real estate magazine. Buyers like bright, spacious rooms, Sandra explained. rearranging a chair in the living room. And they pay attention to cleanliness and order. The prospective buyers arrived right on time. Jason and Millie Cotter with their 4-year-old son, Tommy. A young couple in their 30s, he worked as an engineer for the local power company. She was an elementary school teacher at the same school my grandchildren attended. These are the kind of middle-class families that usually buy homes in our quiet neighborhood. How long has the house been on the market? Jason asked, scrutinizing the spacious living room with its large windows. Just yesterday, Sandra said. You are the first potential buyers. They went through each room methodically, checking the plumbing in the bathrooms, the basement, and the attic. Jason especially scrutinized the heating system and electrical wiring. Millie liked the children's room with its large windows, built-in cabinets, and comfortable desk. Is the school really 5 minutes away? She asked, looking out the nursery window. Yes, I confirmed. It's a very good school with a strong teaching staff. My grandchildren are studying there for the 2nd year and are very happy. Little Tommy ran all over the house, excitedly looking in all the corners and closets. He stayed in the children's room the longest, spinning the big globe on the desk, looking at the brightly colored map of the world on the wall, opening and closing the drawers of the desk. Mom, will it be possible to live here? He asked with hope in his voice. Maybe, little boy, if Daddy and Mommy like the house, Millie replied, smiling. After an hour and a half of detailed inspection, we gathered in the spacious kitchen to discuss the details of the possible deal. Jason took out a notebook and began to carefully write down the specifications and numbers he was interested in. What's the final asking price? He asked, businesslike. $185,000, Sandra said clearly. That's a fair price for a house in this condition and in this neighborhood, Jason agreed after a moment's thought. But we have a few prerequisites for the deal. They wanted to conduct an independent technical examination of the house to check the condition of all the utilities, electrical wiring, plumbing, sewerage, heating system. This is a standard procedure when buying a property, especially one built several decades ago. They also asked to postpone the final move for a month. They needed to sell their current apartment in another part of the city. Those are quite acceptable terms, I agreed without hesitation. Then we're ready to make a concrete offer right now, Millie said firmly. $175,000 in cash, with no mortgage or bank loans. The difference of $10,000 didn't bother me at all. The main thing is that the buyers are serious, solvent, and willing to act quickly, without much thought or additional conditions. It's a deal, I said, reaching out to shake Jason's hand. Sandra promised to have the pre-sale agreement ready by early next week. The Cotter family left in high spirits, actively discussing plans for the new family nest and furniture arrangement. Just a great deal, the realtor said happily when we were alone in the house. Honest buyers. Live money without bank delays, as fast as possible registration. The terms couldn't be better. I was greatly relieved. The most difficult and unpredictable part of the sale procedure is safely behind me. All that was left was to wait patiently for all the necessary documents to be processed and get the money I deserved. We carefully locked up the house and drove back to town. On the way, Sandra told us in detail about the upcoming procedures, technical expertise, signing of the main contract, official registration of the transfer of ownership in the state authorities. If there are no unexpected problems, then in a month all the formalities will be fully completed, she assured me confidently. At home, I was in for a very unpleasant surprise. Eloise was sitting on the porch of my house, smoking nervously and holding in her trembling hands a printout of an advertisement for the sale of a house from an internet site. Her face was dead pale, her eyes red and swollen with tears. Mom, what does this paper mean? She asked in a trembling voice, waving the sheet aggressively. I silently walked past her, opened the front door with my key, and went into the house. Eloise immediately followed me without waiting for an invitation. I demand an explanation. What does this advertisement for sale mean? She repeated much louder and more aggressively. Exactly what it says in black and white, I replied in the calmest possible tone. The house is for sale. But it's my house. You gave it to me less than a year ago. There is no such thing as your house, Eloise. The deed of gift was never officially finalized. It was registered in my name, and it still is. My daughter sank heavily into my favorite chair, pressing both hands convulsively to her pale face. I don't understand anything at all. How is it not formalized? We signed a lot of documents with you, several times went to the notary, paid state fees. We only signed a declaration of intent to donate in the future. But due to numerous bureaucratic delays at state agencies, the final registration was never finalized. And now I've officially withdrawn that application. You have no moral right to do that, Eloise shrieked hysterically, jumping up from her chair. I have small children. Where are we going to live now? In the street? I should have thought seriously about these consequences earlier, preferably before she demanded rent from her own mother for the house she had given her. Mom, I'm ready to forget about this whole rent thing right now. We can discuss it calmly and surely find a reasonable compromise. It's too late for compromise, Eloise. The house has already been sold to serious buyers. What do you mean it's already sold? She jumped up again. You can't sell it without my written consent. Yes, I can, and I have. The buyers made a substantial deposit today, and in a month we will sign the final contract of sale. Eloise burst into tears. Real, inconsolable, desperate tears, as little children cry when they finally realize that they have done something completely irreparable. Mom, I beg you, please. I was wrong to demand some kind of rent. I've fully realized my terrible mistake. Let's try to get things back to the way they were. Nothing can be taken back, daughter. Some words spoken cannot be taken back, no matter how sincere the regrets. But you're my own mother. How can you safely leave your own grandchildren practically homeless? In the same way that you could cold-bloodedly demand rent from your mother for a house that you yourself had received as a gift for free. She paced the room like a hunted animal, sitting down restlessly in her chair, then jumping up immediately, then dashing to the window and turning away at once. It's all because of that damned Karen, she blurted out through her tears. My coworker at the bank. She was always telling me that I was too soft and characterless, that I let all kinds of people get on my back with impunity, even my closest relatives. So my intuition didn't fail me, and Godwin was indeed absolutely right. Someone outside had actually actively encouraged Eloise to make unheard of rent demands. That Karen kept saying that truly adult relationships necessarily require the establishment of clear and insurmountable boundaries, that even with your own parents, you have to be firm and unyielding. And you took the advice of a coworker you didn't know, instead of thinking with your own head about the consequences. I honestly thought I was doing the right thing, that I was finally learning to be a truly independent and autonomous woman, learning to be independent solely at the expense of your own mother, who gave you a whole house out of the goodness of her heart. Eloise cried again, this time more bitterly and inconsolably. Mother, I am on my knees begging your forgiveness. Give me at least one more single chance to mend my ways. I will be eternally grateful for the rest of my life. I will always remember and appreciate your boundless kindness. You've already had your chance, and a very good one. For 3 whole months, serenely lived in the gifted house, actively used my constant, selfless help. And what happened in the end? I made a terrible mistake, but all normal people have a natural right to make mistakes. Of course they do. But for any mistakes, especially such serious ones, you always have to pay dearly. The agonizing conversation continued for another hour. Eloise alternately begged and threatened, sobbed and screamed again. She asserted that she would certainly go to court, that she would find a legal way to challenge the sale of the house. I patiently listened to all this in silence, trying hard not to give in to blatantly manipulative emotions. You are completely destroying our family, she screamed hysterically at the very end. Your own grandchildren will never forgive you for this. It was you, the daughter, who destroyed the family the moment you shamelessly demanded rent from your mother. And the grandchildren will understand and appreciate the situation when they are a little older and more mature. She left my house, slamming the front door with force. I was left all alone in a house that again seemed too quiet, empty, and lifeless. The weekend passed in languid anticipation of further events. Eloise did not call me again, nor did she come with any new demands or requests. Godwin came to see me on Sunday afternoon, and we sat in silence in the kitchen for a very long time, almost hesitant to speak. She told me in detail about her colleague at the bank, said the son at last in a low voice. The same woman who gave her all that unhealthy advice about healthy boundaries and family relationships. Really very harmful and stupid advice. Extremely unhealthy and inappropriate. But Eloise is an old and experienced person. She should have been well aware of what she was doing and what consequences it could lead to. She did. She was just arrogant enough to think she could take advantage of my motherly kindness and love with complete impunity. On Monday morning, Sandra personally brought me a neatly executed pre-sale agreement. The Cotter family had signed all the documents without the slightest hesitation or doubt, and had paid a substantial deposit of $10,000 in cash. An independent technical examination of the house is scheduled for next Wednesday, said the realtor businesslike. If the experts do not find any serious hidden problems, then the final contract we will solemnly sign on Friday. The professional examination went surprisingly smoothly and successfully. The invited experts did not find any serious technical problems with the house. They noted only the smallest cosmetic flaws, which absolutely do not affect the market value of the property. On Friday morning, we solemnly gathered in the spacious notary's office to sign the main contract of sale. The Cotter couple came with a bank check for the full amount, $175,000. The whole official procedure took less than 1 hour. I sincerely congratulate all the participants on the successful completion of a mutually beneficial transaction, solemnly said the gray-haired notary, putting his last official stamp on the documents. I held the bank check tightly in my hands and felt some strange inner emptiness. The money had been received, the goal had been achieved, but the price of that achievement was unexpectedly high and painful. The happy new owners received all the keys to the house and immediately drove to their new family nest. They plan to start actively moving in as early as the next weekend. What will happen to the current tenants? Millie Cotter asked with natural curiosity. When would they finally vacate the house for us? They already know about the sale, I replied evasively. They'll be moving out in the next few days. In fact, I had no idea where Eloise and the little children were going to live, but now it was not my problem and not my responsibility. Sandra drove me home in her car and said goodbye warmly at the porch. It was a pleasure and easy to work with you, she said sincerely. If you need professional real estate services in the future, be sure to contact me. At home, I settled down in Charles's favorite chair and for a very long time thoughtfully looked out the window at the peaceful street. On the sidewalk, the neighborhood children were playing merrily. The ordinary life of a small town went on in its leisurely course. And I kept thinking and thinking about the real price of parental love and maternal care. Exactly 1 year ago, I gave my beloved daughter a whole house from the bottom of my heart, sincerely wanting to help her and hotly loved grandchildren. I wanted my little family to live in complete security, stability, and prosperity. And as a result, I received a brazen demand for rent and an arrogant lecture about supposedly adult relationships. Perhaps from the outside, I did act unnecessarily cruel and heartless, mercilessly selling the house and sheltering my own grandchildren. But sometimes cruelty is the only effective way to teach spoiled adult children to truly appreciate sincere parental care and selfless love. The bank check lay neatly on the coffee table, constantly reminding me of the irrevocable transaction. $175,000. Really very good and solid money for a quiet, trouble-free old age of an elderly woman. But this money was bought by an incredibly expensive price of the final break with the only daughter and adored grandchildren. The phone had been stubbornly silent for a week straight. Eloise hadn't called me once in all that time. She was probably frantically searching for a suitable new home for her family, trying to solve the multiple housing problems she had created with her unreasonable demands and claims. I slowly got up from my chair, cautiously walked to the large window, and again took a long look at the quiet evening street. My house had been qualitatively repaired after the accident. It was warm and cozy. But without the constant laughter of my children and my granddaughter's exciting stories about her school adventures, it was just an ordinary building, not a real living house. Maybe someday in the distant future, Eloise will finally understand and realize what she had done with her own hands. Maybe my beloved grandchildren will eventually forgive me for this forced, cruel act. Or maybe I will remain all alone with my firm principles and a solid bank check. The true cost of boundless parental love has been far higher and more painful than I could have imagined. But some vital lessons can be taught to adult spoiled children only by the most brutal and ruthless methods.